Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back to Morgan Hill Farms. So I'm going to take you on a garden tour today. I thought you might want to see what the garden looks like at this point in the season. So just in case you are new here, I have two garden spaces. We are in the upstate of South Carolina, zone 8A, although I really think we're closer to a 7B because we do get some really cold temperatures in the wintertime. I have 56 raised beds here. And then the garden that I just showed you before that is an in-ground garden that's about 50 or 60 feet by 70 feet long. So I have 9 rows in that in-ground garden. They are 30 inches wide by 70 feet long. So let's start off here with all of these galvanized beds. This is where I had 750 shallots, if you remember. We have harvested all of those, but I have replanted some things here, so let me show you what we have. Okay, so in this bed here, I had succession sowed some dill and some cilantro. I had a good amount of that cilantro come up, so if I want to get a few more jars of salsa on my shelf, I will have that ready. The dill is looking good, and that's going to go until my first frost, which is in mid-October. I did have some extra basil that I had actually grown for somebody else, but then I just didn't get it to them in time, and it was kind of getting root bound, so I threw it in here, but it's looking beautiful. And then I had a bunch of volunteer watermelons. So we have more watermelon here, and then more watermelon here with just a little nasturtium that I started late, kind of tucked in there. Now right here you're going to see 2 plants. These are Long Island cheese pumpkins. I started these late as a second succession, and they have not really produced anything for me just yet. I have seen a lot of the blooms falling off of these guys, so I am hoping that they will start to pick up once our weather starts to cool off a little bit in the coming weeks. And then I have 1, 2, 3 beds here that are open for me. I may be looking at planting some of my fall crops in these raised beds. I typically like to do that in my in-ground garden, but this year I didn't even think about fall, and I totally overplanted everything. And a lot of the things that I planted are going to need until that first frost in order to produce a good harvest for me, or to make that food product storable for me. So I'm kind of kicking myself here, but I did forget about the fall garden. So I have about 300 plants that I need to find spaces for. The in-ground garden has always been a great spot for that, but I'll have to do something different this year. Right here I have some globe artichokes. There's only one that produced for me, and it was so covered in bugs that I never harvested it. I just kind of let it go to seed, and it's just kind of hanging out there. I also have a volunteer watermelon that popped up in this bed. Back behind the artichokes is some fennel. I had harvested a good amount of that, and I didn't need it anymore, so I let this go to seed. I might try to collect the fennel seed from this. Over in this bed, I have another succession of beets. These guys are not doing fantastic for me. The leaves look nice, but they are not bulbing up like my ones in early spring did. So I'm kind of bummed about that. My blackberries back here are pretty much done for the season. I'm pretty sure that they have a fungal issue. I'm not sure exactly how to manage that. I have to do a little bit of research on that, but the leaves are very crumbly and dry, and fungus is really the only thing that I'm kind of being pointed to that's the problem. So I am going to have to try to figure that out. And then speaking of berries, let's look over here at the raspberries. So these guys are now producing for us. We are able to bring up, I don't know, maybe about a pound of raspberries a day, maybe a little bit less than that depending on the day. But these guys have also had some challenges this year. Last year they were beautiful, green, they were all standing up, and the berries were fantastic. And although I do have about 80% of these guys that I feel are doing well, there's 20% that the berries have some type of a mold, and so I'm wondering if these also have a fungal issue this year. I'm gonna have to really try to figure this out because I really don't want to lose all of my perennials to fungus. So maybe that means that I have to treat them with something next year. Maybe that means that I have to do a different type of pruning for more airflow or something like that, but that is something I have to look into. Right in front of my raspberries, I have 2 more Long Island cheese pumpkins. That is a great storage crop for us, so I have those kind of scattered throughout the garden. My strawberries are just going crazy, and I'm kind of dreading having to clean this out and take all these runners up. We have some sugar cube cantaloupe. We have been pulling melons upon melons upon melons off of these beds. I have 2 beds of sugar cube cantaloupe, and that is a hybrid. If you have never grown these before, I suggest you give them a try. Every melon that you will get off of these is going to be sweet and delicious. So when these turn a light yellow color and they release easily from the stem, you'll know that they are ready to pick and ready to eat. Here is some acorn squash that I bought later this season from Johnny Seed. I really wanted to get a bunch of winter squash into the house, so this should have plenty of time to produce for me before our first frost in October. But we are having some bug pressure on these. They look fairly good, but they're just really young plants. So we have a lot of squash bug eggs that I'm picking off right now. We have more watermelons in this bed, more watermelons in this bed, and then right here I have a bed full of a squash called honey nut, which is a small butternut squash that is supposed to be incredibly sweet. And they're smaller, so they can kind of be used for individual portions, which I kind of like, so we're gonna try that out this year. Here is yet another watermelon. We went a little crazy with the watermelon this year. This is a variety called Arangelo, and it is actually an orange watermelon. We have not had one yet that has been ready, but let me show you what you're looking for. I have always had such a hard time trying to figure out when watermelon are ready, and this year I feel like I finally have that down and have finally been able to figure out how to tell when your watermelon are ripe. So let me show you. So if you look at your watermelon and you look where it is connected at the stem, which is right here, it's kind of hard to see, you want to follow that back and look for the first tendril. And this tendril you want to be completely brown, as well as when you follow it back a second time, you see that the second tendril back here is brown as well. So you can see that one's brown. This one has not gone brown yet completely, so this is not ready. This has been like this for so long. I feel like I really want to pick it, but I'm gonna hold off. Here is my second succession of cucumbers. Earlier this year, I started my spring cucumbers. They were a variety called Cool Customer from Johnny Seeds. Their disease resistance was not great, although it was marketed to be really good. This particular variety is called Homemade Pickles, which you can save seed from. These guys are really prolific, but they will get diseased. Right now, I'm taking about 6 to 8 cucumbers a day from these so that I can get all of my pickles and cucumber relish and all of that stuff made from these guys. And then back here, I actually have another succession of cucumbers. This one is called Max Pack, and this is a hybrid from Johnny Seeds. Now, this type of cucumber is actually marketed as the most broad, disease-resistant variety that you can buy. So I'm really hoping that these things push, they really start giving me a big harvest, and that they will go until our first frost so that I can make sure that I get as much on my shelf as possible. If I could get 2 years worth of pickles, that would be fantastic. And I do have a recipe where you can make the crispiest pickles ever. It's a tested recipe. You won't believe how crispy they are. So watch for that video if you're having problems with mushy pickles. This bed here has my turmeric and my ginger. Now the turmeric started off, it was kind of iffy, but man, has it taken off. It is big, beautiful. The leaves do not look diseased. It doesn't look stressed, but my ginger is looking, it's not looking so great. Last year, these were much taller, they were greener, and they just looked a lot better. This year, they're quite small. I'm hoping I get a harvest off of these guys. Last year, I was able to get 17 pounds of ginger, and that was good for us for the year. We dehydrated a lot of that, sliced it thinly and dehydrated that. You can add that back into a pot of water, put it on your stove and boil it, and it will give you the most gingery, spicy tea. You can also make something called ginger bug with your ginger, and you make that and then you add stuff to it and it kind of ferments and it makes this natural ginger soda, which is really cool. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping to do with that this year, as well as medicinal and teas and all that kind of fun stuff. And here is my eggplant. So the plants look really, really healthy, but the fruit has been really, really small on this. So you can see here, here's one right in there, kind of tucked away. There's one. I was hoping that these guys would be bigger, but they are not really getting that big for me. I have gotten a couple off of these, and I'm using these in a lot of my marinara sauces. I just kind of put them in there, saute them up, and then puree them into the sauce. And we make sort of what we call a vegetable marinara sauce that we then pressure can. You can see here's some more in there. And then this one here, not sure where this one came from, but this guy is a different variety, obviously. They're longer and more skinny. So this bed is a little disappointing. This was my second succession of my lemon squash, which is a yellow summer squash. It's just sort of in a round shape. This usually produces like crazy for me. It's very prolific, and what I like to do with this is I like to dehydrate this. I also will use it to make my garden marinara sauce, so I use a lot like that, but I'll slice them thinly, put them on the dehydrator, and then I just add them into soups, stews, any recipe that's baked, maybe a casserole, something like that. But this second succession, I feel like I've only gotten 4 off of this. So I've done a third succession over here, and those are just starting to pop up now for me, but I'm hoping they have a 60-day maturity, so I'm hoping that we can make it before the frost comes to get a good harvest off of those. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just have to go without this year. Okay, on to this side of the garden. So down here is where I had my first succession of cucumbers. Those have been ripped out. I do have a few more coming up there. This is where my first succession of zucchini was, and I've gone ahead and planted a second succession. And I do find it quite crazy that everybody can grow zucchini in this world except for me. I have gotten 3 zucchini this year, and last year, probably the same. And then these plants, they have some flowers on them, but I don't really see any fruit producing. So yeah, so I really stink at zucchini. So if you're good at zucchini, I applaud you, because I cannot get this stuff to grow for the life of me. The plants look fairly well, but they're just not producing. So I don't really know. It's fine though. I'll just get them from friends. On this other side here, I have 3 beds of peppers. So we have a lot of green bell peppers, jalapenos. We've got some spicy ones like shishitos. We have some pepperoncini. And I accidentally canned up a bunch of the shishito peppers, like pepperoncini peppers. So someone's gonna get a big surprise when they break into those jars. I did not realize that the shishito peppers were shishitos. They looked just like pepperoncini peppers. So anyway, so that was another mistake I made this year. But these guys are looking pretty good. I came down a couple weeks ago, harvested about 15 gallons off of these, and then realized that there were no more peppers left. And I kind of panicked a little bit until I realized that these have now started to set more blossoms and set more fruit, because we were so hot. I think that the plants were just kind of going into shock there. We were in the mid to high 90s with no rain. It was just very stressful for the plants, but we did drop down into the 80s, and so now these guys are starting to produce flowers. So that's pretty typical of your peppers and your tomato plants. So hopefully these and my tomato plants will kind of, you know, gather some more strength for a late season harvest, and we can bring more of these guys up to the house. This is not quite big enough yet to harvest, but this is a giant Marconi pepper, and I love to stuff those with breadcrumbs. These are really delicious. One of my favorite sweet peppers of all times. My jalapenos here I planted, they are Craig's Grande Jalapeno, and these guys get really nice and big. These are not quite as big as they get. Typically when you harvest them, you're gonna get something that is about this size here. So they're nice and big. Oh, I guess he fell off. He's a little bit overripe. But they're nice and big, and compared to your regular jalapenos, you get so much more pepper off of this. So if you want to try one, it's an heirloom. Craig's Grande Jalapeno is a really great one to grow. Here are those pepperoncinis that I told you about. And then over here I have a red cherry pepper. So these ones are really yummy when you stuff them with prosciutto and provolone cheese, and then you put them in an oil, and they'll store for a week or 2 in your fridge. I've yet to actually make them. I've harvested some, but these are a hot red cherry pepper. So really excited to try these this year. I just have been so busy, I have not had the chance to make them yet. Okay, so really quickly down this part of the garden here, I have a lot of winter squash. I've got some spaghetti squash here. I have 2 beds of sweet potatoes down there. They're looking okay. A lot of bug pressure on those this year, so I'm still hoping that they produce a good crop for us, because they're a great storage crop to have on hand. Here I have some butternut squash. This bed back here had butternut squash as well. I'm gonna let that bed go empty, and then I'm going to actually put some carrots in that for the fall. And then some Long Island cheese pumpkins. They're a little yellowy. I've fertilized them. Not exactly sure what to do with those guys, but I really hope that I get a crop off of those, because a Long Island cheese pumpkin, they store really well. There's low input. It's a really large amount of food on that pumpkin. When you do get to process them, you're just going to put them in your freezer as a pumpkin puree. And so you can do a lot with that. Soups, you can put it in dog food for your dog if he has an upset stomach. You can make desserts, quick breads, all kinds of stuff. So I am really, really praying that we get a good harvest off of our Long Island cheese this year. Okay, let me walk you over to the in-ground garden over here. So, about a month ago, I ripped out my first 3 rows that had some beans in them and also a bunch of volunteer zinnias, and I planted dent corn. This stuff has grown amazingly. It is so tall now, and it is actually starting to tassel. I just did my second fertilization on this. Corn's a very heavy feeder, and so you really want to know when to fertilize. When it's 4 inches tall, go ahead and throw on a balanced fertilizer like 10-10-10. And then when it tassels, you're going to want to do a really high nitrogen fertilizer like a 3400. If you don't do that, you're running the risk of not getting a harvest. I did that last year and I was very disappointed. So this is dent corn. This is going to produce a corn that you could make polenta out of, that you can do cornmeal out of. So this corn is going to dry on the cob before I can harvest it. So I'm hoping that that happens before our first frost date. But I've timed it out and I think that I am safe with that. Next here I have 280 feet of tomatoes, so 200 tomato plants. We have a lot of Amish paste. We do have a few hybrids in here that I was trialing out to see if they would be as disease resistant as they say they are. And the answer to that is yes. I have found that those plants are showing very, very minimal disease compared to the heirloom tomatoes that I planted. So let me just show you that really quick so you can get a good comparison. You can see that they are still setting a lot of fruit. That 90-degree weather that we had up to 100 degrees really was pretty rough on them, but they're doing fairly well. So here is one of my typical tomatoes. This is a San Marzano tomato. You can see we've got some yellowing leaves with some brown spots, and there's really nothing you can do at this point because every leaf pretty much has this. I have come in here and I have actually pruned these guys pretty heavily. I was really ruthless this year in pruning these guys. Any leaf that had any spot on it I would take, and then I got so busy up at the house that I couldn't do that anymore. And so I kind of let them go for a little while I had to preserve the harvest. And so now they're definitely showing signs of it. But at some point here in the South, you're just gonna see that anyways. There's nothing you can do no matter how much you're on top of these guys. But this one here, this is my hybrid. This is called a Granadero, and it is a hybrid from Johnny Seeds. It's a Roma tomato, so really good for those sauces. If you're making those, it has a lower water content. So let's take a look at these leaves. So you can see that these look really good. There are a few little brown spots here. It is still setting fruit. We still have some blossoms up top. So this guy's doing really well. But I can't say that this is pushing more fruit than the rest of my tomatoes because the rest of my tomatoes also have a lot of fruit. They have blossoms. We've got a lot of green stuff that needs to ripen up for me. I am hoping to still get a lot more harvest off of these guys. I have not gotten enough marinara sauce for the year. I also wanted to do more crushed tomatoes. I also wanted to do salad in a jar this year, and I just haven't gotten to any of that because I have not had the harvest that I thought I would. Of course, marinara sauce does take quite a bit of tomatoes. It really does boil down to not much at all. Now at the end of some of these rows, I have thrown in some Long Island cheese. I had started a bunch of them and then didn't have the heart to kill anything. So we're gonna see if those produce for us. Right here next to my tomatoes, I have a row of Jacob's cattle beans. We harvest these as dried beans. They're like little kidney beans. This row had Jacob's cattle beans in them that I planted in the springtime, and these produced for me, and we went ahead and harvested those and got rid of the plants. So this will be one area that I put my fall garden into. It's not nearly going to be enough space, but I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do to find enough space in the garden. We also have a bunch of okra. Okra is such a good producer down here. It does occasionally get those Japanese beetles, but it's looking really good. It's producing well, and we are just cutting these in slices and then flash freezing them. We have moved the goats. We rotationally graze them, so they are behind my garden right now. They're all staring at me, wondering what we're doing here. Hi, girls. Hi. Hi, honey. What are you doing? Are you being a good girl? Honey is our baby from last year, so she is a yearling. She was a year in May. And that's Peaches. Peaches gave me 2 little boys this year, and then Cream, the one that's laying down, she gave me 2 little girls this year. And Honey is actually Cream's baby from last year. So there they are behind the garden. You can see we've got a little structure down there that I milk them in every morning in case it's raining. There's their house, and then they've got 3 lengths of Premier One fencing that we keep them in, and that's electrified. And then down there is their water, where Nate has piped some water for us down there so we don't have to lug it all the way down here. Okay, back to the garden. I'm hearing some rolls of thunder, so we may get rained on. So let's finish this up. So another Long Island cheese pumpkin here. And then I have a ton of melons in here. I have some Alibaba watermelon. I have some Sugar Baby watermelon. I also have some Sugar Cube cantaloupe. I have some French melons, some honeydew melons. I don't remember all of the varieties that I planted, but let me tell you, they have all been fantastic, and they've all produced amazing for me. At one point I had counted, we had almost 50 melons down here, but we've been harvesting a lot of the cantaloupe. The watermelon, I just brought my second one up to the house, and so we definitely will have a lot more watermelon to harvest as the season goes on. To finish this row off, here are all of my strawberries that I planted from runners earlier this year in February or March, and they are just taking over this entire row. So I'm gonna really have to get in here and thin these guys out, otherwise they will take up this entire in-ground garden. And where my okra was, the other side of this row is all pepper plants. So we have poblano peppers, we've got green peppers, red peppers. We also have a few jalapenos, 1 cayenne pepper that kind of popped up, and I wasn't expecting that. These peppers here do not look as good to me as my peppers in my raised beds, and I think that's because these were started in little 2-inch peat pots, and they were pretty root bound when I put them in. So the soil blocks have shown me yet again that that is a really great way to start your seeds. All right, guys, well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed that garden tour. Like I said, it's a little bit crazier in here this time of year. It's a bit more like a jungle. And if you had the task of trying to decide what plant you were gonna tear up so that you could plant your fall crops, let me know what you would tear up, because I'm kind of at a struggle with it. Of course, the melons could go. I would be very sad, but that's really the one crop that I can think that I would be willing to get rid of. Maybe some of those peppers in the in-ground garden, and then maybe leave the ones in the raised beds here. But anyways, that's what I get for lack of planning. But we do definitely want to get that fall garden in, because that's a huge amount of food. Cabbage, broccoli, spinach, you've got Swiss chard, tons of lettuces, and you know, your peppers, your cucumbers, your tomatoes, those are going to produce up until the middle of October here. So we should be able to get a good amount of food in here. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. If you liked that video, please like, subscribe, and share, and we will see you in the next one.